Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
It's all over the shop, because you've got things, yeah, it's all over the shop, I'm gonna wait. Because I think we're moving around. I think it's an exception. But yeah.
Okay. Are you ready? No one's speaking.
Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to this ordinary meeting of council. I'd like to welcome all of the councillors who are in attendance here tonight, and to those attending both in the public gallery and observing online. Before we begin, I call on Councillor Hoy to give the acknowledgement of country.
On behalf of all present and those watching on webcast, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands in which we meet and to pay our respect to the ancestors and spirits past and present.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Councillor Carr has asked for a leave of absence for tonight's meeting. Is there a mover?
Yeah,
Moved by Councillor Keane, seconded by Councillor Beregi. I put the item, all those in favour, and that is carried unanimously. Are there any disclosures of interest in items? Councillor Keane.
Yes, 11.2 non-pecuniary less significant. Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. It's also a reminder to councillors, council staff and members of the public that you must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during meetings of the council. Councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media activity must leave the council chamber to do so. That takes us to the confirmation of minutes. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Santa, seconded by Councillor Holding. Any discussion? I put the minutes, all those in favour, and that is carried unanimously. Councillor Beregi.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we open the public forum for to hear from our speakers for the following items: 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, 10.9, 10.11, 10.12, 10.13 and 10.14.
Is there a seconder?
Can I add 10.10 as well, please, Mayor?
Yes, and
Thank you.
10.10.
10.10.
Is there a seconder?
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. I put the procedural motion. All those in favour? And that is carried. So that takes us to those brought forward items. The first item brought forward is item 10.2. There is one registered speaker, Davey McDonald. If you would please come forward and address the council.
I'll be very brief. The reason I wanted to come up and ask a question in regards to this was that it isn't yet out and it's very often published in November, but I wanted to know if there was any way that in future that the annual general report, which I haven't yet seen and nobody has, could actually be in future somewhat more expeditious in making it available, and perhaps it could be made available for the public prior to any future election of councillors, so we can get a review. It's just a matter of transparency. That's just a question I have.
Thank
That's all I
you.
wanted to do.
Thank you, Mr MacDonald. It is not under our code of meeting practice that those addressing from the public gallery can ask questions, but I will clarify that it's a statutory matter. The council was not in control of the timing. It has to happen within the first 3 months of the new council.
Okay.
That brings us to that item, the annual report. Is there Councillor Berricky?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh, do you wish to speak to the item?
I do brief.
Councillor Welsh, if you could turn on.
That's fine, got it. Thank you. I would briefly like to speak to the annual report and to the state of North Sydney. We are here discussing some difficult issues later on today, but I think it's really important to highlight some of the wonderful things that have gone on in North Sydney, and they have. And I was just saying to Councillor Hoy, I thought it was absolutely astonishing to see in the report that over 1.1 million items were borrowed from Stanton Library in the last year. And I just think that is an absolutely unbelievable number, and shows how important services like the library are. We had over 775,000 visitors to Stanton Library, and I wouldn't hesitate to say that that number would be much higher if Stanton Library was larger and more accessible, because there's many times that students and members of the public come to the library and can't find a chair, can't find a desk, and can't find a place. So these are the services that council provides and which are very much loved by our community. There are some wonderful statistics also in terms of the council's performance, which I think everybody should read, even if you just pick up a couple of pages, which said that 92% of residents were very satisfied with council's strategic direction, which is 3% higher than comparable councils. And 87% customer service satisfaction exceeded expectations by 23% higher than the target. 69% of businesses were satisfied with council and their communications, and a whopping 96% of residents were satisfied with council's community engagement, council's engagement process, well above target. And I just would like to briefly talk about council's engagement process, which we've recently been out on the biggest community engagement, the Have Your Say for the next 10 years. And the engagement has been fantastic. It's not just people coming to council and giving their opinion, but council has actively gone out and sought a wide range of residents and ratepayers who probably have never engaged with council in any meaningful way and been asked their opinion. And the feedback that I've heard is that people were really thrilled to be asked and more than happy to be involved. And I think this is how this council is operating. We've welcomed people back into the council. We've welcomed the gallery back to the council, and we haven't put a limit on speakers. Anyone who wants to speak is more than welcome to. And I would really commend everybody to have a read. It's quite a nice, easy reading format, and some of the numbers of what the council does are really quite exciting, and really sets a big platform for us for next year.
Is there any other discussion? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I too wanted to pull out a few things because I think this was a terrific report. North Sydney Council's annual report is a comprehensive overview of our shared journey and achievements over the past year. This report highlights the progress made in delivering high-quality services, fostering community connections, and creating a sustainable and vibrant future for all who live, work, and visit our local government area. Following extensive public consultation, Council adopted the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study in May 2024. This comprehensive framework will guide the future development of Neutral Bay, ensuring that it remains a vibrant and well-designed community space. In response to heritage investigations, Council finalized 2 significant planning proposals, introducing a new heritage listings for properties on Parraween Street and Holt Avenue. This highlights Council's commitment to maintaining the area's historic character while promoting thoughtful development. 88 Writers at Stanton events were attended by 5,500 people, and over 120 people are volunteering in our bush care programs. The Shorelink 40th Anniversary Membership Campaign in 2023 helped boost attendance and engagement at the library, as Councillor Berge has already alluded to. Council continues to support and operate 48 additional library programs, contributing to community learning and engagement. And there were 53 citizenship ceremonies held with 2,294 new citizens. I support the recommendation.
If there are no other speakers, I'll Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge the $13 million surplus within the report.
If there are no other speakers, I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. The next item brought forward is item 10.3, the financial statements. I think they were brought forward by Councillor Holding. Do you have a motion?
Not a motion. I just wanted to comment on the financial statement.
Before you do, is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Welsh, seconded by Councillor Antonini. Councillor Holding, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, as a newly elected councillor, financial statements like these have been perfect over the last month and a half in gaining an in-depth grasp on the finances of this council. Having previously followed North Sydney's progress closely as a resident, it has been a huge change and privilege to have access to the chronology, information and process on which decisions are made. This data very quickly illuminates the successes and sins of former councils, and it is to the council staff's credit that all councillors now have clear access to in-depth briefings supported by historical and contemporary data. One of the reasons I ran for election was my increasing frustration at the near decade of chaos North Sydney endured from 2012 until 2021. Incredibly bad decisions taken by the council during that era have proved catastrophic and costly, not just in money, but in time and missed opportunities. I'm pleased to say there are very few of the drivers from that time remain here in the chamber. Unfortunately, the madness of that era has provided the financial legacy which drives our current council's poor fiscal outlook. Later in this agenda, I'm sure we will discuss that more fully, both via a need for a special rate variation and the finances of the North Sydney Olympic Pool. During our recent councillor strategy weekend here in North Sydney, it was evident that the council directors and CEO place information and the clarity of its provision as a priority. This is absolutely key in continuing the work of the previous council in cleaning up the mess. Unfortunately, this all takes time we can ill afford. As reports like these are published, the community and media finally have the dossier and tools to make their own informed assessment on whether the paperwork supports a policy. The information on which we base our decisions is back where it belongs, firmly in the public domain. Financial statements like these illustrate clearly that it's possible to learn not just with the benefit of hindsight, but under a proper analysis of contemporary data. It was possible for former councillors to foresee the poor position they have placed us in today. If you're asking yourself how the Olympic pool redevelopment could quadruple its cost from 30 million to over $120 million, look at who voted for it. The numbers do not lie. Some detail remains legally privileged for now, but at the conclusion of everything, it will be available for all to see. This is certainly a story worthy of investigation, perhaps even a documentary in the near future. I commend the quality and openness of these financial reports, but more importantly, the ethos of informed transparency, once again reinstated at North Sydney Council.
Thank you. Councillor Berge, did you wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mayor. As Council's delegate to ARIC, I'd just like to pass on their appreciation and thanks to council staff and for the timeliness and in fact before time reporting of the financial statements, which is in stark contrast to when the beginning of the last term of council, when not only were the financial statements late, they were also incorrect because we couldn't get hold of the information that we required on various items. So I would like to ask the CEO to pass on our thanks to the, I don't know her title, CIO, Chief Financial Officer, and her team for an outstanding job in great time.
Are there any other speakers? I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. That brings us to the next brought forward item, 10.4, quarterly budget review. There is one registered speaker, Mr. McDonald. Thank you. If you give your name and where you are from.
David McDonald, I'm from Haybury Street in North Sydney. And my reason for coming up here was to ask some questions regarding the budget review statement. And it's similar to what I asked before, the question around the annual general report. I would like to see when the agendas come out that there be a link in the document so we, as the stakeholders, those of you in the public gallery, can see what is being discussed. I'm interested to know what the detail is of the unspent funds. And also I think it would be useful to include in that what the current expenses are being incurred by councillors and the chamber that we are in today, including the mayor's expenses, so on and so forth. I'm fascinated, and this is off the cuff, when we talk about transparency and we hear councillors get up extolling the virtues of an annual report that we haven't yet seen. To be self-congratulatory.
I have to interrupt you there because that is just not true. It has been on public exhibition and this is a return post-exhibition of the report. It has been publicly available for months. Thank you.
I'm going to claim 10 seconds back. The fact that you just heard that is that I'm not aware of that and you're probably not aware of that. Why is it not published as it would normally be? I often go through, in fact I do, I can show you evidence where I go through every annual report. I haven't been able to do that here. Challenge it, I may not have any reason to challenge it, but it should be available. I find it extraordinary that we can hear from a councillor that the last financial reports were late. But that is nothing that I've ever heard before, and we as the public don't get them until November. And we can't challenge that. And so I would say, councillor, that perhaps you should refrain from besmirching people that went before you here. Councillors that were here, I've been here often. I've rarely seen you here, councillor. Rarely seen you here.
I'll just draw you to order. Imputing improper motives and insulting anyone in the chamber is contrary to our code of meeting practice. I just ask that you give your opinion with respect.
Okay, I'm grabbing 10 seconds back. That's 20
no,
I'm owed. No, I'm taking those 10 seconds back, councillor.
Mr. McDonald, I am chairing the meeting. I'd ask that you continue, but I ask that you continue with respect.
I don't know that I've been disrespectful. I've just been straightforward and expressed an opinion, which is what I'm entitled to do. I've used no expletives. I've made a challenge, and anybody who comes here is entitled to do that. It's about transparency, and kid yourselves not. Transparency, wait till a bit later in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I take it there are no questions of the speaker. Is there a mover for the item? Councillor Berrigan.
Madam Mayor, I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh. Any discussion?
Just briefly, Mayor, this is the quarterly budget review, which comes out quarterly on Council's agenda every quarter. And for the September one, you will notice a decrease in the operating deficit. And I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the issues that Council is facing. And we will discuss more of them tonight. But one issue that we are facing is a reduction in parking meter revenue. And one of the reasons we have parking meter revenue decline is that we have lost a numerous number of parking spaces due to the state government works. But we are also not collecting as much money because the commissioning of the new meters means that people are only paying for what they use. They're not paying for 2 hours and then only staying half an hour. You can actually claim it back. So in our in wanting to provide a faster, better service, we've actually made ourselves even more efficient. And what this has done is that we are going to have to look at the lines of revenue for council, which we will have to do if we're not to cut services.
Thank you. Are there any other discussion? I'll put the item. All those in favour? Those against? That's keen against. That is carried. That brings us to the next brought forward item, 10.6, the informing strategies. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by councillor Welsh, seconded by councillor Holding. Are there any speakers? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to speak to one of the studies, and it's the integrated transport study. And the North Sydney Integrated Transport Study was a strategic framework designed to enhance transportation within the North Sydney local government area, aiming to create a sustainable, efficient, and accessible network for all users. The study addresses the key challenges such as traffic congestion, parking demand, pedestrian safety, and public transport connectivity. The key priorities included improving active transport, enhancing public transport access, sustainable solutions, and traffic management. The study forms part of North Sydney Council's commitment to long-term urban planning and aligns with broader metropolitan strategies for environmental sustainability and improved quality of life. As the chair of the Sustainable Transport Reference Group, I've seen firsthand the great work council's staff have done in the integrated transport space. I encourage everyone here to read the document and all of the other community strategic planning informing strategies in these business papers and give your feedback. The council's staff have done an exemplary job in producing these documents, and our community will benefit over the next 10 years. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome this initiative, first for our council, and I'm particularly pleased that it has resulted from close collaboration with the community, with much of it coming from community input. I read the economic development strategy paper with close interest, having myself run a small business in North Sydney. I know and share the community's concern over possible rate increases, which we'll be discussing in the next agenda item. But I urge the community to consider that question in context, including in the light of what has been discussed in this informing strategies report, namely the economic development strategy paper. In the light of what has been discussed in this informing strategies report, our search for other sources of revenue to help pay for the necessary services we provide to the community. In particular, this strategy seeks to revitalise and grow the North Sydney CBD as a high amenity top tier office precinct, to grow North Sydney's economic hubs, to create vibrant villages and local centres, to encourage the establishment of and growth in nighttime economies in the North Sydney CBD, Crow's Nest and Neutral Bay, thus increasing business, including in the hospitality sector, through growing local and out-of-area Australian and overseas visitation. Madam Mayor, as you and my fellow councillors know, throughout my time on council, I've been pushing the establishment of North Sydney as a tourism destination, given its potential to offer the very holiday experiences so many, particularly foreign visitors, are looking for. For example, our beautiful harbourside parks and walkways offering uniquely Australian views of coastal rainforest, mangroves, and First Nation petroglyphs and mittens, going back to the time of the Egyptian pyramids. These experiences are on show against a unique backdrop of the harbour, bridge, opera house and city, and they can be topped off with a delightful meal offering in our cute coffee shops in Kirribilli, Crow's Nest or Neutral Bay. The question for me is, why hasn't this happened up to now? This exciting economic development strategy, if implemented, will increase employment opportunities in the LGA, profiting from our strategic location and highly educated workforce to make us an attractive destination for new investors and businesses, thus increasing usage of our facilities, including parking. And through this attraction of buying and renting business and residential property users, will have a new pool. We will have a new pool of ratepayers and consumers of our products. It will help to demonstrate that we are not simply seeking standard increases in our traditional sources of revenue, but also exploring new, exciting strategies to give us a sound financial basis for our necessary services to the community we serve. In short, this proposal is new and exciting. It gives us the opportunity to explore new ideas for increasing our local government area's economic growth, at the same time as obtaining new revenue sources for council, a win-win all round. I compliment the staff for their professionalism in preparing the groundwork and coordinating the preparation of these 8 vital strategies. I realise that North Sydney currently faces a big financial challenge, but with these strategies in place, we're ready for it. I urge every member of our community to read this report, and I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, councillor Santa. Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to speak on the culture and creativity strategy. It's a subject which I'm particularly passionate about, and it's ideal that this strategy is an informed long-term channel to help advocate for the arts. My own background is in a creative industry, but beyond that, I'm keen to help unleash creativity in all its forms within our area. This strategy includes the main pillars of theatre, live music, drama, dance, comedy, craft, art, performance, heritage, and culturally important events or sites. And it's a community-centred approach, as Councillor Santa mentioned, which has been sadly absent in North Sydney, which is helping to form one of 8 key strategies to focus council efforts across the next 10 years. The recent North Sydney Festival was a fantastic starting point, showcasing our ability to provide a platform for bands, street performers, art, craft, stalls, cooking, and cultural interactions. My personal favourite was the indie band Stumps. It doesn't get any better than gender-bending rock just outside the doors of Aldi in the CBD. It's also not purely about performing, but discovering outlets for creatives to meet, socialise, collaborate, rehearse, and spark off each other. It draws on youth clubs, collectives, and social inclusion. This may be art, but it's also a business. The creative industries draw crowds, and with that exposure comes purchases for tickets, food, and drink. The arts and entertainment sector is worth 14.7 billion nationwide, and according to research in this strategy, the North Sydney sector generated 124.4 million in 2023. As if to reinforce this, an art piece titled Comedian sold a few days ago at Sotheby's in New York. It comprised of a regular banana costing just 35 cents, duct taped to a wall, eventually selling for just over 9.5 million Aussie dollars. Never underestimate the earning power of a creative idea. So if all the world is a stage, this strategy now provides the vision and direction to increase those spaces and outlets for our performers. At the most recent citizenship ceremony here on Friday, it was clear that there is an abundance of creative talent in our schools. The ceremony featuring musicians and singers. So I'm delighted to encourage an informed strategy working in this area. We can now shape a strong behind-the-scenes council, helping to provide our next generation of creatives with the potential avenues to shine.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Mayor. I also acknowledge the work the staff have done to put together these informing strategies, but I can't support them. They all have a budget line. This for the gallery and for online. They are going to consultation, so they'll be having a budget line attached to them. And until we sort out 10.7, the special rate variation, I don't think we can commit to the 8 informing strategies.
Thank you, Councillor Berrigy.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think we're committing to anything, Councillor Keane. We're undertaking community consultation, which is one thing that was severely lacking in the North Sydney Pool development project. There was no community consultation, and that was formed part of the independent report into what went wrong. I'd like to just speak briefly to the open space strategy. And open space is a very fraught one in a 10.9 square kilometre local government area with a state government of all persuasions taking up our parklands. However, we push on. And in the strategy, it very clearly outlines the challenges for the council, but also the opportunities. And the opportunities have already started being explored, with the Mayor meeting with every school and working with schools and community groups about how we can better use the facilities that are already in our local government area. Doing nothing is not an option. We can't not have sport being played. We can't not have public open space. In days like this, at the moment where people are under enormous stress, the more public open space that people have to wander in and to think at no cost to themselves just merely because they live in North Sydney is a wonderful thing and should be encouraged. We also are looking at how we can make the existing facilities that we have more multi-use. Tennis courts, if they're not being used, could they be used for something else? We're looking at how we can make North Sydney Oval more accessible as well. It is a beautiful oval. It is an iconic oval, but it is also a local oval, and it should be able to be used for all, and that includes Bon Andrews. And those strategies are already underway. But it is a challenge, an enormous challenge, when at every turn we lose a tree, we lose a park, we lose more parklands, but we plough on because we are here for our community who are growing and growing very fast, and it is our role to provide from them. And if we don't have money, we can't provide anything.
Just before I give you, are there any other speakers? Just before I give Councillor Welsh her right of reply, I too would like to speak to this item. It has been referred to by many of the speakers about the extraordinary community engagement that was part of this Have Your Say for the next 10 years. And it was extraordinary. It began with consultation with a youth council, representatives from every primary and secondary school. It included First Nations consultation for the first time ever in North Sydney. It had a demographically reflective group of 60 North Sydney residents who, as Councillor Beregi said, many of whom had never been engaged by a council before. More than 1,000 individual submissions and contacts. And the reason it was most extraordinary was that it did not start with an outcome in mind. It was a true engagement. And what you see in these informing strategies is what came from the community. It struck me, I attended every part of that engagement between May and July. And what struck me was that it didn't matter who was being engaged, their age, their ethnic or socioeconomic background or gender. There was one thing that was most striking, and that was about a desire and a need for connection. And that's why I often commented during that engagement that the social inclusion plan was probably the most important plan and strategy that we were putting together, because it was something that really each of the other informing strategies is working towards, whether it's open space, whether it's arts and culture, whether it's economic development or integrated transport. It is bringing opportunities for people to connect with each other. And that's not surprising in such a divided and polarised world, and also in a post-pandemic world. One of the things that I think is quite shocking and is a hallmark of severe neglect of a succession of former councils was that when we recruited our Chief Executive Officer and she arrived here in November 2022, there were just two strategies. There was an environment strategy and there was a housing strategy, which is a statutory requirement under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. This is the first time ever that this council has prepared informing strategies, and they are vital to ensure transparent, community-focused services and measurable delivery of those plans and services. It's the first time, I think, shockingly, that with the amazing history of North Sydney, that there is an arts and culture strategy. And when I talk about that, I talk about some of the best architects and artists in the country have lived and worked here and still do. Part of strengthening the council as an organisation to be efficient, effective, accountable, and this is these informing strategies. It's part of the heavy work of unpicking the decade of chaos and neglect and about bringing this council towards best practice. Councillor Keane talked about the plans and projects that are at the back and recommended in each of these strategies. And that is for our community to consider. Those plans and ideas came from our community. They speak to the priorities of our community, and the point of putting them on public exhibition, particularly with the financial repair strategy, is to understand the appetite that our community has towards them. Many of them go to planning. Many of those items are at 100,000, 200,000 to start the planning. So for example, a master plan for Camaray Park, a master plan for Blues Point Reserve, because if there are any lessons to be learnt from our predecessors, it's that poor early planning leads to disaster and good planning leads to incredible things. And you have to have a plan if you're ever to grab grants and other contributions to be able to implement them. So the really modest investments that are proposed, which will provide services and activities and projects that our community have already told us that they want and they prioritise and they need. So like every other speaker, I would like to thank the staff, but I'd particularly like to thank all of the participants in that engagement. And I urge our community to review these informing strategies, to engage with them and to provide further feedback to guide this council for the next 4 and 10 years. Thank you. Councillor Welsh, do you wish to exercise your right of reply? Now, I put the item. All those in favour and those against, Councillor Keane against, that is carried. That brings us to item 10.7. There are a number of registered speakers. And so as I call you, if you would come forward and give your name and who you represent. The first registered speaker is George Loiterton.
Good evening, George Loiterton, resident of Cremorne. My submission today addresses 10.7, the special rate variation. Firstly, to timing and transparency. The SRV outlines that COVID and the pool have adversely impacted the council's financial position. In April 23, a council report detailed the project will require a new baseline, increasing this to approximately $90 million. Why has it taken over 18 months for any action to occur on this first budget blowout? Just 5 months ago in June, the 24-25 operational budget was released. In that plan, there was no mention of a financial crisis requiring structural reform. How is it now in November, we're staring into a second budget blowout to $122 million for the SRV? Secondly, I'd like to address the SRV as elements are incomplete. Page 7, chart 2 of the SRV compares average residential rates for 14 metro councils. Why is it that chart 2 omits City of Sydney and Parramatta, which are critical comparisons due to the population size and commercial mix? Their rates are $741, $1,013 versus North Sydney, 1040. So North Sydney's rates are not the lowest. Very comparable councils have even lower rates again compared to the residential numbers. It is also not suitable to compare North Sydney to Hunters Hill, which has a population of just 20% of us and limited commercial use. What's detailed in the chart is way too simplistic to draw an accurate conclusion, and the conclusion has significant bearing on the SRV justification. When reviewing page 4, chart 1 of the SRV, it highlights a deficit in the next 10 years of $6.4 to $11.8 million every year. This is the foundation of the financial crisis. However, this analysis includes depreciation and amortisation. When you go to page 28, table 3, this details the cash position of North Sydney. And this has a surplus of $6.5 to $8.5 million cash each and every year for the next 10 years. These are the accounts. So in plain English, without the SRV, council will still add $67 million to the bank account over the next 10 years. And if this is the case, there is no justification for the SRV. Page 7, income statement, base case details the next financial year, and expenses will grow by $12 million. Amazingly, on page 34, the SRV proposes expenses will be $20 million next year, an increase over 14% over the financial year. So hold on. We're in a financial crisis requiring significantly increasing rates and structural reform, whilst at the same time the SRV proposes to spend even more money. This is not structural reform at all. In addition, the SRV does not consider the impacts of potential asset sales, additional government grants or robust expenditure reduction plan. The proposal should not move forward without these inputs. In summary, this submission requests transparency on the timing, given the pool recent report in early 2023 and the June budget, which raised no financial crisis. Secondly, the scale of the increase is not justified against the future cash position and the SRV must be withdrawn. Lastly, Without any focus on expense structure reform, there is no financial justification for the SRV. Costs need to be reviewed urgently, apparently, because it's a financial crisis, not just for FY26, but for this year, this upcoming half, January to June. To address the outlined long-term financial stability, the community requires action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker?
Mayor, are we able to table that report, please?
Table what report?
What Mr. Loiterton just said, can we table it for all councillors to read it?
What report?
His speech. We
That's
table
a
it?
speech, not
I know,
a
but can we have it
report.
tabled so we can
Well,
read it?
you would have when we get to the item, you can
Okay.
move that if you wish to.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, registered speaker, is Kate Branch. If you would please come forward. It would be usual for the speaker to email their submission, but I'm sure it could be.
Hello, this is the first time I'm speaking. I'm a business owner. I have a property here in 44 West. I just wanted to say raising the rates at the percentage that they're being raised is quite shocking as a business owner. But what I'd like to say is if they have to be raised, which I am not keen for, but if they have to be raised, I do understand that the pool has blown out. It needs to be fixed. We are aware of that. We're not going to leave it drained and empty. But moving forward, I think as a community, we need to keep an eye on annual expenses that this council spent. So say, for example, fighting land environment last year and fighting court cases came to 3.2 million. If that is combined, if we keep fighting things to stop progress, then we might be looking at, say, over 10 years, and bear with me, this is the first time I've spoken at a council, you're looking at $32 million with a 2% inflation if we continue to fight things like this year on and year on. So that's quite a big expense. So yes, we're looking at the pool and trying to move forward as a community, but I think we really need to focus on the annual spend of what this council's spending, because if our rates are going up, which I don't want them to, if it's just going to get thrown into things like that, then I really don't see that as a positive increase. But like I said, I'd really like them not to increase, but if they do, I think we should have more transparency on where that money goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation. The next speaker, registered speaker, is Davey McDonald. If you would come forward, please.
Hi. I find it extraordinary. I was here before challenging a rate increase. It's notable that there are only 3 councillors in this chamber this evening who were here, and that time when I was here, when I was actually, an attempt was made to eject me from the public gallery because I was so incensed about a rate rise coming in. And it's interesting, my comrades of that time are no longer my comrades. And I come here to oppose this rate variation simply from the point of view, and I'm not as eloquent as the other people we've had here, but simply from the point of view that we're in a financial crisis with people, costs of living, etc., etc. And I believe, without going into detail, that once the pool is open, then things will settle down and the income will come in. And I just want to check under the table a moment, because one of the things I noticed when we come in here, it's time to stop kicking the previous council under the table. Okay, you've been here long enough, some of you. It's time to move on and start to deal with the issue in terms of it is what it is, and we've got to work through it. And there were unforeseen circumstances that led to the blowout. And I don't know what any of you people in the public gallery or some of you councillors here really know what the causes were for the blowout. That's not the position I'm here will be able to talk about to you, but there are facets that occurred that were unforeseen. It's like in any building project, there are variations. And that's what I want to impress upon you. I am appalled that this should be happening in this way. The rate of it is absolutely appalling. And if you really are progressive, you would oppose this, councillors. Absolutely. That's all I wanted to say to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation. The last registered speaker on this item is Lyndon Stokes. If you would come forward, please. No, if you stand, thank you.
My question,
If you could give your name and where you're from.
My name is Lyndon Stokes. I live in Lindsay Street. I'm an owner, occupier of my apartment. On the 30th of October, I had a cup of coffee with Felicity Wilson, and there are others present, and she raised the matter that the state government offered North Sydney Council a loan to cover the costs of the completion of the pool, and that loan was rejected, and that our rates would be increased.
I'm sorry, that's
the information I was given.
Well, I'm
And I think that you really need to speak to Felicity Wilson because there were witnesses present. And I do believe another councillor is aware of this.
do you have anything more to say?
Well, you're saying it's not true, so what else can I say?
Yeah.
So,
well, if you would,
I wanted to know why it was rejected, but if you didn't receive the
No.
offer, yeah. So I'll also find out more information. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of the registered speakers. Is there a motion? Councillor Berrigy?
Thank you, Mel. I'll move the recommendation.
Do you wish to, is there a seconder? Councillor Antonini, do you wish to speak to the item?
Just briefly, Mayor, and then I'll reserve my right of reply. What we are doing today is undertaking community consultation. There are no decisions being made except to communicate with our community over the period of time, which is set by the state government. It's not great to be consulting over Christmas, I admit. However, that is the cards that we are dealt under the local government and the requirements to report back. So we are actually going out to our community to seek their feedback, and I don't think that anybody could vote against that.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to highlight the critical importance of the special rate variation proposal before us. If approved, the SRV will enable council to address a series of significant financial challenges that have been mounting over the years. These funds will help reduce the loan for the pool, the albatross around our neck, which has brought us to this crisis point. It will help clear a backlog of delayed projects, maintain essential asset renewals, and start implementing strategic priorities identified in our long-term strategic plans. The rising costs of maintaining, repairing, replacing, and upgrading our community assets and infrastructure have created a growing infrastructure backlog. It is not just the pool that has brought us to this juncture. To put this in perspective, since 2019, Council's infrastructure backlog has ballooned from 41.9 million to an alarming 146.8 million in 2024. As a percentage of total asset value, this backlog has risen from 3.8 to 9.3%, far exceeding the acceptable benchmark of 2%. Without intervention, this backlog will continue to grow, leading to further deterioration of vital community assets. This is not just about numbers, it's about the tangible impacts on our community. Parks, roads, community facilities, and services we all rely on daily are at risk. Every delay in addressing this backlog means higher costs in the future and fewer resources to dedicate to the new infrastructure and services our evolving local government area demands. Our financial sustainability review makes it clear, without immediate action, council risks becoming financially unsustainable. Balancing the need to address past infrastructure shortfalls with the demands of the future is one of the most significant challenges we face. This requires us to make difficult but necessary decisions now. The willingness of our community to invest in these changes will be pivotal, and it may involve additional funding or adjusting existing services to achieve long-term sustainability. It's a collective effort that requires transparency, engagement, and most importantly, action. Tonight, I urge you all to consider the bigger picture and the consequences of inaction. Together, we can ensure that our community needs are met today and into the future. Let's take the steps necessary to safeguard the sustainability of our council and the quality of life for our residents. I support the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Welsh. Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the staff involved for preparing such a comprehensive analysis of our financial situation and options for remediation. I note the advice in this report that the average council residential rate, including special rates levied for environmental and infrastructure purposes, is $1,040 per annum. And I compare this with the strata levy for our residential building in North Sydney, a levy which our strata managing company considers to be well below other comparable strata title properties. It's $7,400 per annum. Since the Building Owners Corporation is having its AGM tonight as we speak, I may be advised by the Owners Corporation's chairperson, my wife, when I return home tonight that it's been raised even further. I remember when we moved from St Ives to North Sydney 30 years ago, how pleasantly surprised we were when we received our first rates notice at how much cheaper the rates here were compared with Ku-ring-gai councils. I also note the point made in the report comparing our rate levels with those of other Sydney metropolitan councils, especially Willoughby, Ryde, Lane Cove and Mossman. We are the lowest, about 40% below Mossman's, for example. I look on the circumstances which have brought our financial situation about more in sorrow than in anger, particularly those aspects concerned with the renovation of the pool. But I reject the argument that the immediately previous council was responsible, at least in part, for the situation of the pool. We acted to fix the mismanagement of the pool project as soon as the situation was brought to our attention. That is when, less than 6 months after we were appointed as a council in January 2022, we were presented with the first large cost variation. We immediately agreed to appoint a consultant to investigate the management of the project. And when we were shortly after presented in the consultant's report with an outline of the systemic problems under the project, we immediately took action to resolve them. Like every other North Sydney resident, my wife and I are ratepayers, and we share the concerns at the proposed increases, all 3 options presented in this paper. But as high as the proposed increases in the options presented in the report are, they would still only place us at the average of the rates levied by the other councils included in the study and in the middle of the pack. I'm also mindful of the alternatives if we refuse to face up to our financial situation. All residents have to consider the implications of not addressing this problem and getting us back on track financially, as proposed here, on a once-off basis right now. What will they think if the rubbish is no longer collected as efficiently, or the library can't stay open as long as before, or the graffiti on the walls is not removed, or the community centres have to reduce their services, charge higher fees, perhaps shut down entirely, or the parks, gardens, stormwater systems and seawalls are not effectively maintained, or the potholes in the roads aren't fixed, or the weed infestations on the centre strips, footpaths and verges are not fixed, etc., etc. Because we no longer have the funds to do these and the many other services we provide for the community. With some sadness, therefore, and mindful of the financial burden we will all have to face if any one of the options presented is adopted, I'm even more mindful of the effects on us all of the deterioration in the provision of the vital services this council provides if we fail to address the serious financial problems we currently face. I therefore endorse the recommendation that we seek community consultation on the options presented in the report.
Thank you, councillor Santa. Councillor Keane.
Yep. Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a motion to table Mr. Leutenton's speech, please.
Yeah, as a procedural motion, is
Yep.
there a seconder to table Mr. Leutenton's speech? Councillor Spencer, all those in favour? Those against? That is lost. Okay.
Can I speak as well?
To the item?
Yeah. Councillors, there is a cost of living crisis. Why are we seeking why are we asking our residents to pay more for living in our LGA? This is unacceptable. We are presented with papers tonight that shows a $13 million surplus for the last financial year. To be in this position and asking residents to cover this is outrageous. Council should consider other options, such as selling some of the investment properties as part of a broader financial strategy. Our ratepayers don't need to wear this cost. Both Waverley Council and City of Sydney apply for a dual category system for business rates, one for their central business districts and another for suburban centres. At this stage, the distribution is for North Sydney at 60-40. 60% is attributed to our residents. Why are we not creating a subgroup for the North Sydney CBD businesses that we can attribute more of our rates? Investigating options, that's what I'm asking, investigating different options rather than just raising the rates for our residents. Car parking revenue has dropped. It has been mentioned already this evening and projected to continue to. No wonder, because no one can use the parking meters. I say consultation is shocking, to Councillor Welsh's point, ending on the 10th of January. It's unacceptable. Everyone's away, nobody's focused, it's Christmas period. I say put everything on hold for 6 months, focus solely on the pool. Let's try and get this finished after all these years. Madam Mayor, yes, every informing strategy that we mentioned does have 100K, 120K attached to it, but it accumulates. We have a pool that needs to be finished. I'd like to move a motion. We refer this to the Legislative Council, New South Wales Parliament, Upper House for an inquiry. In addition, refer to the Office of Local Government for an inquiry. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. There is no question that this council does have an asset backlog. We have had years of underinvestment in our assets. We do have a very expensive and blowout pool to deal with. But this budget is prepared in such a way that those issues are dealt with incredibly quickly, are paid off incredibly quickly. When this council has access to debt, we can go and borrow money to defer these costs over 20 years and not put the entire rate burden onto the ratepayers. This is an outrageous increase with no notice. You know, Councillor Welsh, you talk about, the importance of providing service to our community. That has to be balanced with the cost we provide or we take from those residents as well. There is a huge amount of people in the gallery here tonight because this matters to every single person in our LGA. It matters to their back pocket, to their wallet. It's without notice, and it's a huge rate increase that if we spread the costs, if we use debt, if we pace our asset renewal program, we don't need to raise rates this amount. The pool isn't coming about again in 5 years' time where we have a cost blowout. We don't have any major projects that can blow out tens of millions of dollars again. So the rate rise that will pay for a huge amount of the cost blowout of the pool isn't necessary once that's paid off. So let's use smart financial management. Let's spread this over a greater period and not put the burden of this straight onto the residents with no notice, with zero notice. If you look at the options provided, this is, we talk about this is just consultation. Consultation is one step in the process closer to people being hit in the back pocket. That's the problem. And the consultation has do nothing and the council will be in trouble. Agreed. We just stick with the rate peg. But then the next option is a 65% increase in rates over 3 years and a 50% increase next year. Where's the balance in this? Why aren't we consulting with our residents on a lower increase? Why are we providing no increase, 65%, 111%? Where's the 10% increase? Where's the 15% increase? Why are we not looking for consultation from our community rather than force feeding them outcomes of 65 to 111%? Why? Let's hear from the community. Do you want a 10% increase, a 15% increase, and another 10% increase after that, and we reduce some of the services? Councillor Santa will have you believe that that means that the rubbish is not going to get picked up. This is not true. This is a base level of service. The cost is going into all of the larger and less critical projects. Rubbish is never at risk. Don't fall for that argument. This council will always operate. But part of the budget process and the build-up process for this was a wonderful offsite. It was really well run, where we were given the option to put coloured stickers on items that we thought were important, but without consideration of cost. If you give me 10 items, I'll go and put 10 stickers on all the 10 things that I'd like to see happen. But if you tell me that it's going to come with, each sticker comes with a 10% rate increase, I'll be much more careful with those stickers. I'll probably take the stickers home with me. I used to be on a board of a not-for-profit company that had 20,000 members. It used to do these surveys out to members and say, what would you like us to do every year? Do this, 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 and this. And we get the surveys back, and the surveys were great. They always wanted more services. So the first thing I did once being elected to this body was to say, okay, let's do the member survey, but ask them if they want that service, if it comes at an increase in cost to their member fee. And the transformation was remarkable. Suddenly, nobody was ticking yes to every box. They were ticking yes to 1 or 2 boxes out of 20. We can do everything for the community. We can do everything that we think is important. But everything we do comes at a cost that's going to be borne by the public. And a 50% next year increase, 65 to 111%, is not reasonable. We can manage this better, councillors. We can, as I said, spread our asset renewal program over a longer period. It doesn't have to be urgently done in a short period. We can pay off the pool by borrowing money and spreading that out over a longer period. Simple financial management. This is a great budget if what you want to do is end up with a council that sparkles and everything's perfectly done and clean and no debt and wonderful position. But that is at the cost of the ratepayers. Every dollar comes out of their pocket. I've been in a lucky position to run many hundreds of millions of dollars businesses and do budgets and deal with CEOs with budgets. And every CEO, to their credit, wants more and to do more and to build the best infrastructure.
Come to the end.
But that comes at a cost. Our job, like in a commercial business, is to pull that back. To say, what does the community want in balance with their rates? And that's what we haven't done today. Thank you, Mayor.
Before I go to Councillor Berrigan for her right of reply, Councillor Antonini, do you wish to speak? Could you turn off your?
Sorry, I also wanted to move an amendment if I could.
Yes, if you wish to move an amendment, you can.
I'm happy for Councillor to speak.
Councillor Antonini, you have the floor.
As a newly elected councillor, I was not naive to the fact that our council had challenges. What I have learned since becoming elected is the depth of those challenges. The good work done over the past 2 years is evident, but the facts are clear. We are facing problems that have arisen from over a decade of chaos, of poor choices and poor management. Former councils that have made outrageous decisions on behalf of our community and have continually chosen to kick the can down the road and neglect their duties. Decisions that have forced us into situations where we are now considering selling public assets and our residents are facing these rate rises. The hard truth is we are now living with the consequences of past failures. There are people in this room who did not stand up for our community. People that chaired a sport and rec committee that were happy to have the roof blow off a basketball court due to neglect. There are people here who ignored the community's preference to simply refurbish our pool, keeping spending in check. Instead, these people voted to radically increase the depth and scope of this project and voted numerous times in support of reckless and unnecessary spending on North Sydney Pool. Let me be clear. Our job is not to take the easy road. Our job is to do what's right. And that means making the tough decisions. I want to thank our Madam Mayor for her courage and leadership guiding this council to face these issues head on. We have no more time to bury our heads in the sand. The councillors supporting this motion are not aspiring politicians looking to further their careers. The councillors who support this do so because we understand there are no alternatives left to ensure that this council has the means to deliver the services and amenities our community expects and deserves. Madam Mayor, it brings me no joy that the only responsible action now is to support this recommendation.
Councillor Spencer, you had an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to amend the motion to include options 4 and 5 in the public consultation. Option 4 being a 10, 15 and 20% increase in rates in years 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. And a 15, 20, a 10, 15 and 25. Is that the first option we captured? Sorry. 10, 15 and 20% increases.
So if we could put that on the.
Yep. Can we?
So the first, so you want an additional 2 options,
Yep.
10, 15 and 20%,
Yep. Across the 3 years.
and 10, 15. That's the same thing again.
Yeah. So that was the first option, and then second option.
25%, 10, 15 and 25. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, is the mover prepared to take that on?
No.
No. Is there a seconder for that? Which is that the whole of the recommendation with those 2 additional? Okay.
I can second it.
Do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. This is public consultation. Why can't we vote for this? Why can't we take this on, Councillor Beregi? What we're asking is, and actually, sorry, for the amendment is that we also note that a number of services, non-critical services, will have to be deferred or reduced in the amendment, in the lower rate categories. Let's go out and ask the community what we want. We keep telling the community that they need these levels of services, that we have to be able to provide these levels of services. The point of consultation is to go out and ask people what they want. These are the ratepayers. These are the people paying for it. Are they happy to pay absolutely high rate increases and get a high and incredibly detailed level of service? Or would they prefer to pay a lower increase and do away with or defer some of the less critical, less fundamental projects? This is what we should be asking. This is what we should be doing. As councillors, we represent our community. We're not here to dictate. We're not here to say, this is what you need. You know, you need these services. So let's do the right thing. Let's go out to our community and ask them what they want. Do you want a little bit less services on the critical and pay a little, have a lower increase in rates? But we are talking about people who have to make financial decisions based on this. They might have to sell their apartment. None of this is planned. We aren't also putting enough of the cost burden, to Councillor Keen's point of view, on the CBD. I've rented thousands of office spaces, the square metres in office space. I couldn't even tell you what my rates were. My component of my rent in CBD office space was my rates. It was right down the list of things I cared about. Office rent space was number 1. Cleaning costs, sure. Security, and then rates was just insignificant. Also, rates for commercial businesses are tax deductible. Tax deductible. Guess what? The impact is half on those businesses in the CBD. These are large businesses benefiting from the amenity, the wonderful area, the great location we provide for people to live. They benefit greatly from it. They also benefit, and the reason I started my business in North Sydney was I loved North Sydney, but it was also 35 to 40% cheaper than the CBD. And increasing our rates more for the CBD would make zero difference to the affordability of North Sydney over the CBD. Tax deductible, ladies and gentlemen, put it on to the federal government. Why are we not working harder, thinking harder, delaying some of these asset renewals and not giving at least the community the option to provide comment on that as a variant? Let's put it in the document. Let's hear what people want to say. If you vote against putting a lower rate increase into this document, you are voting against community consultation. You don't want to hear the answer. You don't want to hear what they have to say. Yes, it will come with lower services, but let's put it to them. Let's ramp the rates up over a longer period of time. Years 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get to parity with Mosman, even though, I don't think that's a fair comparison. They don't have CBD income, but let's get to parity with them. But let's do it over time and give people warning and bring them on the journey, not just slap 50 to 100% on our residents overnight. Consult on a lower amount of a rate increase. This is what we have to do. If we don't, we're falling into that wonderful trap of desiring an outcome and putting the information that we only want into the consultation so that we get the outcome we want. Let's not be that type of government that you see on TV shows. Let's not do that. Let's be right. Let's ask the community what they want, what level of service, and at what rate increase. Please, I implore you, put that into the consultation, do the right thing, and let's be open and transparent and listen to our community. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're speaking to the amendment?
I'm speaking to the amendment.
Yep.
And what I want to clarify here is that number one, in the original motion, which is number one of the amendment, is that council undertake community consultation. Councillor Spenceley went over and over again that we weren't doing community consultation. So I just want to reiterate that, yes, we are going to community
Point of order,
consultation.
Mayor. The document that we're providing to the community for
No,
feedback.
there is no point of order. You don't agree with what she's saying. That's not a basis for a point of order. Did you wish to continue?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Keane?
Well, I agree with councillor
So
Spenceley.
you're speaking
To the amendment. Yes, I'm speaking to the amendment. We need to ask our community what they would like. We are putting forward a recommendation for extremely high rate rises. And to councillor Spenceley's point, it came out of nowhere. It's overnight. People are struggling. Everybody's struggling at the moment with the cost of living. I really think we need to think about asking our community for the lower levels that councillor Spenceley has put forward. When we talk about the recommendation for consultation, councillor Welsh, that is for consultation on the higher rate rises, not the lower ones.
Thank you. Councillor Berry, you're speaking on the amendment?
Speaking on the amendment and speaking against the amendment. Councillor Spenceley, I'm a bit shocked at what you're suggesting, because you're suggesting something which will make no difference in taking out more debt. We're in $50 million of debt, if not more. I don't know who you think pays the debt, but the ratepayers pay the debt. So there's no federal government paying the debt. It's the ratepayers that pay the debt. And it is just kicking the can down the road to make you feel good in this kind of environment. I really wish that we had, Councillor Keane, engaged in some kind of community consultation during the pool redevelopment program when you were in the majority, where on the floor of council, the budget went from 28 million to 58 million without any idea where that money was coming from. 30 million. There we go. And do you know why? Because, as our report found out, councillors on the floor of council amended the design without the community being consulted at all. So I'm thrilled that now you're up for a community engagement, but there is nothing to say that any member of the public can't just write their own submission based on whatever they like. They might like zero. They might like their garbage services cut from every second week having household and green waste. They might like it monthly, 3 monthly, like Mossman, I think 6 monthly. They might like that. But the idea that we just plunge into more and more debt is, quite frankly, irresponsible and reckless. We cannot cover any more debt. I'm not sure whether you were actually at the briefings where it was mapped out for us that this is not an option to do nothing. It's not an option to tinker around the edges. It is an option. And the idea that we just keep putting off asset renewals, if you read the asset renewals, they're coming into asset replacement, and asset replacement is mightily expensive. And to suggest selling assets, you sell an asset once. And not only do you sell the asset, you lose the revenue that you get from the asset. And I don't know what anybody is thinking about selling assets. The fact that we're even thinking about selling an asset is heartbreaking. You never want to sell an asset. The council owns those assets for the community. If you want to go and sell assets, you can go and community consult on selling assets, but I have no intention of selling assets because that is
Just point of order, Mayor. I didn't
irresponsible.
raise selling assets.
You did.
No, I didn't, Mayor.
You did raise selling assets. I'll go back to the tape.
Please, yeah, please do.
No problems.
I'm just going to rule on the point of order. I don't recall a reference to asset sales. There was debt and there was other
And
things.
asset sales.
So
But
perhaps you
debt,
could continue.
debt, is that how we're going to live in debt? So the debt would be over $100 million for this council. And I don't know about you and debt, but debt requires servicing. You have to pay back the debt. This is just denial. This is absolute recklessness. None of this is a surprise. I'm sitting here going, who is surprised that we're doing this? We have been briefed on this. The financials have been out there forever. And to come in here and say, oh my goodness, look at what the council's doing. Either you haven't been paying attention to the papers or you've been, disinterested until all of a sudden the paper came up. This and the other thing about the date and circulating, as I've said before, is that we have absolute no control over when the consultation happens. It is terrible that it happens over Christmas, New Year, but that is the same with every other council that's applying for a rate variation. Northern Beaches, Willoughby, there's a whole list of councils because the issue is that where we're at and cost of living applies to councils just as much as it does apply to families.
Councillor Spenceley, will you be exercising your right of reply? Oh, sorry, Councillor Holding has.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I just wanted to speak briefly some of the issues that Councillor Berrigan has brought up. This isn't a surprise to us. The council papers are produced 10 days in advance, so both councillors have had a chance to have a look at it. I don't mind considering some of the points that James has brought up, which is
Councillor Spenceley.
Councillor Spenceley, sorry, has brought up, which are the lower increases. But I think, again, producing them on the floor of council, sort of surprising us, a bit like a report that's being tabled. I don't mind reading a report, but I don't like being surprised with it on the night that we're making or supposedly making a decision. This is obviously consultation, so it's not so crucial, but there's no reason why emails can't be sent between councillors to make suggestions or amendments or to a table amendment for us to consider it before the night of council. I think that's the proper process. It's a better way of doing things, and it avoids the situation that we have with the North Sydney Olympic Pool, whereas, as Councillor Berrigan said, we had people throwing in changes and amendments on the night and deciding it there and then. This is what we want to avoid, and if we want to avoid doing that, we have a proper process, we have notification, we have discussion. You can make a suggestion. I don't like being surprised with something on the night of the meeting, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you give your right of reply, I'm going to speak against your amendment, and I'll be very brief. Your suggestion that we should be exploring additional debt beyond the 51 million is a real issue with intergenerational equity. It truly is placing the burden on the future generation, and there's absolutely no understanding as to how that may be serviced. This is scarily familiar to me, which is ad hoc suggestions on the floor of council, and that is the poorest of practice. They're random numbers. There's no modelling behind them. They're not addressing the biggest issue, which is the reason for those high first year provisions are to address liquidity issues. There is no sense that what you've even put forward would remotely address the careful work detailing the council's current financial position that has been undertaken and briefed over and over to councillors, but expressed in very clear terms in an array of documents that have been on public notice for at least 10 days. As to the notice about council's financial position, council has been on notice for years about this. Even in that previous former term of council, there were reports about the impacts of COVID and the financial impacts that would eventually have to be addressed. And as for community consultation about priorities that our community has, that's the very point of this consultation. Item 10.6 is going out to our community. Item 10.7 is there about what is your appetite for funding, and those decisions will then be made when we're informed by that community consultation. So for all those reasons, I won't be supporting the amendment. Councillor Spenceley, you have your right of reply.
Thank you, ma'am. Debt in a private business or a listed business can be a scary thing. You can lose customers, you can have major events, cost blowouts in enormous projects. Debt in a council is much more serviceable. We have ratepayers. Someone moves out, someone moves in, they still pay the rates. Debt isn't a scary thing. It isn't intergenerational. If we can balance this, we can come up with a way to spread the debt, spreads the payments over not 3 or 4 years for the pool, but over say 20 years. So what we do is we work that debt down over 20 years. We don't have to pay it all in 3 or 4 years and therefore need such significant rate rises. The way you pay for that is in a 10, 15 and a 20% or 25% rate increase. That is still an enormous rate increase. That's 35, 40%. That's not far off the 65% in financial year, in option 1. But what it does do, it doesn't surprise residents. It gives them a 10% increase. They get used to that 1 year. A 15%, they can budget for it. A 20 or 25% increase. That's what we want as residents, right? We want some stability and some structure from our council. So we still, as a council, over 3 years, get 37, 38%, 40%, when the percentages are compounded. We spread the pool burden over a few more years. Let's say we spread it over 7 or 8 years. We can even pay our debt down early. We shouldn't be just dismissive of debt. We're a council. Governments do it. It's normal. It's a way to spread major infrastructure burdens over longer periods of time so that the taxpayers or the residents don't have to have 100% increases, 60% increases, 75% increases in their rates. Councillors, by not putting this into the document, by not giving an option to the community to comment on, we are not engaging in open and transparent community consultation. Yes, it may be rushed. Yes, I might have just guessed the numbers, or I might have done some rough work in the background. But this is not the final numbers. As we point out, this is just consultation. If we go out to the community and say, would you prefer 10, 15 and 20%, plus some of the projects that you want maybe us to do that we've consulted you on, we'll have to push out. Would you prefer that? Is a valid question to ask. We are absolutely not doing our job if we don't ask that question. A vote against this amendment is a vote against transparent, open community consultation. It's not binding us to anything. It's not the final budget outcome that we have to live with, but it will give us a huge amount of guidance about what's important and what matters to the back pocket, to the budgets, to what the kids get to go to school in, all of those things that we affect by putting this burden straight onto the community in year 1. Please vote for community consultation and open and transparent consultation. Thank you.
So I put the amendment. All those in favour? Those against? The amendment is lost. That takes us back to the debate on the original motion. I think almost everybody had spoken to that. Councillor Beregi, you were to have your right of reply, but if you wouldn't mind, briefly before you do, I would like to speak to the motion. This is a newly elected council, and just weeks ago, each of us made an oath to apply and uphold the Local Government Act. But most importantly, in that oath was to abide by the guiding principles for local government that is embodied in that Act, that speak to strong and effective representation, leadership, planning and decision-making. They speak to planning strategically, using the integrated planning and reporting framework for the provision of effective and efficient services to meet the diverse needs of the local community. And it also crucially has decision-making principles that apply to the decisions of councils, including recognising diverse local communities' interests, considering social justice principles and the cumulative and long-term effects of actions on future generations. And really, it's been said tonight on more than one occasion, but if only a former council had taken those principles seriously. Since we recruited and appointed the new Chief Executive Officer, Council has committed to addressing the financial position of this council. To Councillor Spenceley's comments on the motion, That has become as no surprise. It has not been a secret. There have been quarterly budget reviews. There have been financial statements that have been publicly disclosed about the concerns around sustainability, including the impact of the North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment on council finances. And that was a project that was rushed from start to start in the middle of a once-in-a-generation pandemic, a global economic downturn, and saw the original downturn in the then parking revenue. It was before there were even final construction drawings available, and with the tender process telling the former council that the project was not a $58 million or even a $64 million project. Since then and over the last 2 years, council has looked first to internal efficiencies with a major restructure that reduced management positions to increase on-the-ground resources, as well as a detailed organisational improvement program that includes salary restructures, a service manual. Yes, North Sydney didn't have a service manual, which is embarrassing and shocking to admit, but it goes to the neglect of previous councils. An asset review and a process mapping, just to name a few. Since I became mayor, I very publicly stated that we as a community would have to have the open, honest and difficult conversation about how to repair and protect council's financial health, vital community services and assets. This newly elected council is determined to tackle this head on and work to ensure that council is able to deliver those vital community services and that we are ultimately in a better shape than what we have inherited. Those local government principles, particularly those relating to leadership, are about not taking the easy way out. As Councillor Antonini said, it's not ducking the big issues facing our communities. For those who say don't look at a rate rise, cut services, sell assets, engage in even more debt, I'd say it is not that reductive or simple. To achieve additional income that is represented by the proposed SRV that we are being asked to consider, we would have to cut 38% of operational expenses. 46% odd of council's operating costs relate to staff. North Sydney Council, like every council, is constrained. Local government operates under an award. Skills shortages are real and workers want to be part of a sound and strong organisation. I'd ask you, what do you suggest? Materials and contracts? Well, most of those costs are fixed. So I understand and share that the frustration and indeed the anger, especially at a time when everyone is under pressure from the rising cost of living. Many people will feel angry about having to address these issues at all. It's especially challenging knowing that this outcome could have been avoided with better governance and decision-making in the past. I share that frustration. There is absolutely, I can tell you, no satisfaction in I told you so, having been one of only 3 councillors to sound the alarm against the financial impacts of the decisions of the former council. However, this council has an obligation and a commitment to that very transparency and accountability as we work to restore financial security and long-term sustainability. And one of the most responsible and prudent steps is to explore a special rate variation. So while we're committed to ensuring absolutely that our community has a voice, and we need our community's input throughout this process, only together can we decide that best path forward. So no decision will be made without being informed about the views of our community as part of this community consultation. As Councillor Beregi said, we've undertaken community consultation before. People are given options as the starting point of the conversation, and more often than not, all sorts of other options are returned as part of that consultation. This isn't window dressing, it's a real and meaningful consultation, and that's why I support that the motion to place those proposals on public exhibition be supported. Councillor Beregi.
Thank you, Mayor. I too, like you, it gives me no pleasure to say I told you so, but we did tell you so. And we are ratepayers as well. We can't kick the can down the road. The asset renewals are something desperate. The Stanton Library, when it rains, leaks and sewage runs into the children's library. It has to be cleared out, it has to be cleaned, it has to be renewed, and it's closed. When it rains here, We put plastic sheeting around the window and we put a bucket underneath because we haven't repaired the roof. These asset renewals are real. And the longer you leave an asset without maintenance, it becomes replacement. And that's not where we want to be. When it rains over the weekend, the staff come in and they put a big rubbish bin under the leak in the hall. And if it rains too much and it overflows, they just say, look, it's okay. We've got carpet tiles there, so we'll just pick them up on Monday and put them out in the sun and let them dry, and then we'll bring them back in. The idea of pushing out asset maintenance anymore is not an option. It is just not an option, and we have been told that on numerous occasions. The council staff have been through iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration of options. This is not where we wanted to be, but like the Mayor, like Councillor Antonini, like Councillor Welsh, we are here to make the tough decisions. And it isn't really a tough decision to put the financial future of the council out to the community for their feedback. And they don't just have to comment on the options provided. It provides information, the strategies. They can provide whatever feedback they'd like. That is true community consultation. But what we have said is what the situation is. And it is pretty concerning that when you look in your agenda, in bold by our Chief Financial Officer, Council's financial position is very weak and the financial outlook is unsustainable. It doesn't get more clear. So I would urge Council to vote for the recommendation that we consult our community openly and honestly. And when the feedback comes back, that we take it on board and we make a tough decision. And whatever that tough decision is, it's made with the community first and front of our minds.
Thank you. Closes the debate. I put the item. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Keane and Councillor Spenceley, the motion is carried. That brings us to the next item brought forward, 10.8, draft amendment to the North Sydney Development Control Plan 2013, 183 to 185 Military Road and 1 to 11 Rangers Road and 50 Yeo Street, Neutral Bay, post-exhibition report. There are a number of registered speakers. The first is Kathy Peters on behalf of Neutral Precinct. If Ms Peters would come forward, please. Give your name and who you represent.
My name is Kathy Peters. I'm the here. I'm the Secretary of the Neutral Precinct. Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Councillors. I speak tonight on behalf of the Precinct Committee as there was no time to hold a precinct meeting between reading the report to Council and the meeting tonight. The precinct, however, has discussed this development many times over the last 4 years, and the committee is well aware of the precinct members' views. The precinct committee is seeking further amendment to 2 of the proposed amendments in the DCP. Firstly, in relation to form, massing and scale, which is 5.1.5.2. The Sydney North Planning Panel gave a decision recommending the Minister approve amending the LEP to increase the maximum building height for Woolworths. But in that decision, they recommended that Council ensure the living areas of all dwellings in Yeo Street achieve a minimum of 2 hours sunlight in midwinter. Council's proposed amendment to the DCP states only to ensure 70% of dwellings on the southern side of Yeo Street receive a minimum of 2 hours sunlight at the winter solstice. Precinct Committee requests this be changed to ensure that all living areas, the living areas of all dwellings in Yeo Street receive a minimum of 2 hours sunlight in midwinter in accordance with the Sydney North Planning Panel's recommendation to Council. Secondly, in relation to access, 5.5.5.9, the proposed amendment reads, vehicular access may be provided for the Yeo Street subject to adequate demonstration that it will not create any adverse pedestrian conflict. While any adverse impact on pedestrians is certainly an important issue, we would like you to add, nor adverse conflict to the traffic flow in Yeo Street. By their very nature, supermarkets, car parks generate considerable traffic flow. The lodged concept DA for this site proposes additional customer car spaces. And while we know this will be addressed during the DA assessment process, we believe the DCP should contain a reference on adverse impact on traffic flow in order to inform that DA assessment at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms Peters? Councillor Keane, if you'd stand.
Thanks, Ms Peters. So just to confirm, you're recommending 5.1, 5.2, that you change that to all dwellings, provide 2 hours of sunlight?
The living areas
The living
of
area,
all dwellings in Yeo Street.
okay. And 5.5.5.9, adding in traffic in conjunction with pedestrian conflicts.
Adding nor adverse conflict
Nor adverse.
to the traffic flow in Yeo Street.
Okay. Thank you.
You could turn off your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Are there any other questions? No, thank you for your participation.
Meg, may I just ask, we have one resident who was unable to register but would like to speak if there was an opportunity on this.
Yes.
Her name is Nia McCulloch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move that, Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Spenceley, seconded by Councillor Berrigy, that we add the additional speaker. All those in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you, that's carried. The next registered speaker is Chris Bosley, also on behalf of Neutral Precinct. You come forward, please. Give your name and who you represent.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Chris Bosley, long-term resident of Neutral Bay. I was asked to speak on the matter about sunlight for the dwellings in Yeo Street. And I'll admit, when I was asked, I thought, why do I want to speak about that? Because I really don't have a dog in this race. I live halfway down the hill. The only issue I'm going to have is the 2 years we're going to have to put up with crossing Military Road to do our shopping when the new development happens. Then I read the proposal that 70% of the dwellings on the southern side of Yeo Street are going to lose their winter sunlight. Bad luck for the 30%. But I think the bigger issue with this is this sets a rather bad precedent which could come to your homes, whether you're in Camaray, Kirribilli, Cremorne, Milsons Point, wherever you are, this sets a bad precedent. Having lived in the area for over 30 years now, I've been the beneficiary of the DCP as much as we all have, whereby we live in a rather, considering the number of people that live in this area, we have comfortable outdoors spaces and living areas. And I think to allow this amendment, or whatever you want to call it, to go through, I don't believe that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? No, thank you for your participation. The next registered speaker is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones on behalf of Willoughby Bay Precinct. If you would please come forward. Give your name and your precinct.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. I'm Chair of Willoughby Bay Precinct. The precinct, like hundreds of locals who put in submissions on the Woolworths planning proposal, has consistently expressed concern about traffic and overshadowing. High turnover customer parking generates traffic. Woolworths first proposed 252 publicly available spaces, 164 retail spaces plus 88 extra public parking spaces. Council's submission to the department said the extra 88 spaces would have a detrimental effect on the local road network. The department required the removal of the spaces. Woolworths has now lodged a concept DA, this is an alternative to a DCP, with a potential 276 customer spaces. While setting a total cap on parking without regard to the mix of uses may not be appropriate, we now know the mix Woolworths is putting forward for the purpose of determining car spaces. Given council says 252 customer spaces is 88 too many for the local road network, then 276 is 100 too many. I ask that council amend the DCP in a manner consistent with its submission to the department and the department's determination, and limit the retail and commercial customer parking at 1 to 7 Ranges Road and 50 Yeo Street to no more than 180 spaces. Dwellings at 53 to 59 Yeo Street opposite Woolworths receive sunlight throughout the day midwinter. In a Land and Environment Court decision, Senior Commissioner Roseth said, consider a dwelling that now receives sunlight all day. Taking away that sunlight from 9 a.m. till noon would satisfy most guidelines. And yet the occupants of such a dwelling are likely to perceive it as a devastating impact on their dwelling's amenity. The solar diagrams exhibited by council for the Military Road Corridor Planning Study showed these properties would continue to receive sunlight from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in midwinter. North Sydney's DCP says at least 70% of dwellings within a residential flat building should receive a minimum of 2 hours of sunlight between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. midwinter. However, the proposed amendment suggests a provision just for Yeo Street. Ensure that 70% of dwellings on the southern side of Yeo Street receive 2 hours of sunlight at the winter solstice. This would allow overshadowing of individual buildings, total overshadowing of individual buildings. The Sydney North Planning Panel with Peter Debnam as chair met on 31st of October. I attended that meeting. The panel unanimously recommended that council be requested to ensure it is satisfied that any development application demonstrates that the living areas of all of the dwellings in Yeo Street achieve a minimum of 2 hours sunlight in midwinter. The report in front of you does not include the panel's recommendation, which was published on the planning portal on the 12th of November. It is clear the recommendation will better protect the amenity of dwellings in Yeo Street. I ask that council amend the DCP as requested by the panel.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your address. You just about parking. You have asked council to restrict the number of commuter and customer spaces to 180. Is that the number that you?
Correct. The number of retail spaces that Woolworths originally asked for, so publicly available spaces was 164. And I have suggested 180 retail and commercial customer spaces.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for your participation. The next registered speaker is Alexandra Serafimovska. Thank you. If you could give your name and rank.
Pretty good, thank you. I'm Alexandra Serafimovska. I'm a resident of 57 Yeo Street, which is directly affected with the losing of a sunlight with this proposal. I'm here with my neighbor Marcia. We just want, first of all, thank the council with all these years of support they gave us, and the community, because it was absolutely fantastic. And I won't repeat myself because all the previous speakers said everything what I have to say. And on behalf of 57 Yeo Street, I would like to thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker? No, thank you for your participation. Oh, yes. The next registered speaker joins us online, and that is Anthony Brogan, who is attending remotely on behalf of Ethos Urban, representing Fabcot Proprietary Limited as owners of 1 to 7 Ranges Road. Thank you, Mr. Brogan. If you could give your name and who you represent and address the council. Sorry, if you need to unmute yourself. Thank you. You should be able to be heard now. Oh, you've muted again. And it seems to be muting automatically. Are we able to? Mr. Brogan, we can't hear you. If you could just try it now.
Speak really quickly.
Perhaps if you leave the meeting and come back again, and we will try. And in the meantime, we'll hear from the last speaker in the room, Nia McCulloch. Thank you. If you'd come forward.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and councillors. My name is Elizabeth McCulloch and I'm the Secretary of the Strata Plan 21760 at 61 to 63 Yeo Street in Cremorne. And I speak on behalf of the owners of the Strata Plan, as we're all subject to the lack of sunlight. It is of major concern and something that we obviously do not want to lose. Someone else provides it, so we accept it, and we'd like to continue to doing so. My major concerns actually are the pedestrian and usage and safety of those said pedestrians along Yeo Street. Of course, it is very heavily used in the mornings for children going to school. I'm concerned that with the advent of the changes that the Woolworths is proposing, that they are now going to have a single entry into the car park with 2 exits. That is widening the width of the vehicular access way, and it's dangerous anyway. And once you start making these things more difficult for children to access, it's just waiting. It's almost waiting for an accident to happen. The other part of that is for the supply to the loading dock by the various vehicles that Woolworths uses. I have witnessed that it took a semi-trailer supplying to the site 11 minutes to manipulate and to gain access and to reverse into the loading dock. It is proposed, I believe, that they have a drive-in and a drive-out. If the situation doesn't improve in Military Lane, I would suggest that there may well be inability for that actually to occur, having witnessed what it was like for this particular vehicle to gain access. It meant that he had to manoeuvre across both lanes of the traffic of both westbound and eastbound Yeo Street. He had to reverse up and then to drive straight down the road again on going east, and then had to reverse across the lane again to get into Military Lane and then reverse into the loading dock. That took 11 minutes, but it doesn't sound much when you say 11 minutes, but 11 minutes driving a semi-trailer fully laden is quite a marked thing. They're the main things I wanted to say. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker?
Sorry.
No. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Councillors, Councillor Berrigy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, sorry. We'll try Mr. Brogan again.
How's that?
Oh, not only can we hear you very loud, thank you. If you give your name and who you represent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors. My name is Anthony Brogan. I'm a town planner at Ethos Urban, representing Fabcot, who are the owners of 107 Rangers Road and 50 Yeo Street. Thank you for providing the opportunity to speak this evening. So FabCat have been on a long journey with the council for this site since the first adoption of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study. A planning proposal for the site was lodged in January 2023, and on 25th of March 2024, FabCat was approved for gateway determination by the Department of Planning. The submitted planning proposal was accompanied by an indicative development scheme for the site, which was subject to thorough design testing and development. The planning proposal was considered by the North Sydney Regional Planning Panel on the 31st of October, and the panel recommended that the proposal be finalised on the 12th of November in its current format. So gazettal of the proposed LEP amendments is anticipated to take place in January 2025. Importantly, throughout the planning proposal process, we specifically refined and amended the scheme to ensure that
Mr.
council's
Brogan,
concern.
if you could repeat your last sentence, you froze.
Said gazettal of the proposed LEP amendments is anticipated to take place in January 2025. It's important to bear in mind that throughout the planning proposal process, we have specifically refined and amended the scheme to ensure that any council's concerns were appropriately addressed. This was through refinements such as including building articulation to reduce the bulk and mass of the scheme and increasing the size of the proposed public plaza. 2 development applications have been submitted for development of the site, a concept development application in August of this year and a detailed development application in October of this year, both of which are consistent with the ongoing plan proposal. FabCat have undertaken extensive work and consultation to get the planning proposal to its final stage, which has been supported by the Regional Planning Panel. They've also sought to evolve the scheme in response to the feedback received during the process, and the proposed future development outcome enabled under the planning proposal should not be precluded by the draft DCP. We have reviewed the draft site-specific DCP in its current format and request that it is updated as follows. Reduce the requirement for a 1.5 metre setback to Rangers Road at ground floor level to a 0 setback, and remove the 10 metre height limit to the podium on Yeo Street. There's a 3-storey podium proposed currently within the wording. However, there's a 10 metre limit also proposed now within the amended DCP. The current planning proposal scheme proposes a 3-storey podium that's consistent with the proportions of the adjacent site at 9 to 11 Rangers Road, the Neutral Bay Village Planning Study and the finalised PP for the site. I trust that councillors will take these requests into account and support them to ensure a positive development outcome. And thank you again for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Brogan. Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation with a change. Okay. So 1 is the same, that council notes submissions made to the exhibition of the draft DCP. 2, the council adopt the draft amendment to the DCP 2013 as amended, except for items 5.1.5.2, form, massing and scale, and 5.1.5.9 access. You're right. Keep going. Okay. To replace under 5.1.5.2 P4, ensure that 70% of dwellings receive a minimum of 2 hours sunlight at the winter solstice. Under 5.1.5.2 one
And replace.
and replace, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With.
Oh, no, that was the replacement.
It's not, it isn't though, is it? It's to ensure that
All dwellings,
in
sorry.
Yeo Street
All dwellings in
achieve
Yeo Street, sorry. Replace,
2
sorry,
hours.
all dwellings in Yeo Street receive a minimum of 2 hours sunlight at winter solstice. 70%, so that was looking at my strike through.
And then in Yeo Street. Or dwellings in Yeo Street. After the word dwellings.
And in 5.1.5.9, we add a P6, which is that the number of retail and commercial customer spaces be limited to 180 spaces.
And sorry, and if I may ask the mover, are you going to also amend the
driveway.
provision, the provision that Ms. Peters referred to in 5.1.5.9 access to add the words nor adverse conflict to the traffic flow in Yeo Street?
Yeah, that was it going to be, yes, absolutely. Sorry, but are you putting that in 5 point?
I think it's in one of the P.
Sorry, yes, it is. No vehicular access to be provided from Military Road. Vehicular access should be provided from Military Road. So P3, despite P2, vehicular access may be provided from Yeo Street subject to adequate demonstration that will not create any adverse pedestrian conflicts. Is that?
So at nor adverse conflict to the traffic flow in Yeo Street.
Nor adverse, yes, in P3.
Impact to traffic.
So which one is that in, sorry?
So in P3.
Of 5.1.5.9.
Yeah. In P3. Read, despite P2. Vehicular access may be provided from Yeo Street. Subject to adequate demonstration that it will not create any adverse pedestrian or traffic conflicts.
To the traffic flow in Yeo Street.
To the traffic flow on Yeo Street. Conflicts. To the traffic flow on Yeo Street. And Madam Mayor, I'd like to add a P6 where we don't have a double driveway. I think that is a terribly dangerous situation.
I think you have to do it in a positive way, which is that there be single driveway.
Single driveway, ingress and egress.
Yeah.
Yeah. A single driveway. Well, it can be single egress and ingress, ingress. So that's a little bit convoluted. So the number of retail spaces.
So two now becomes that council adopt the draft amendment to North Sydney DCP 2013 as amended, except for items 5.1.5.2, form, massing and scale. And I think you need the words which is to be changed to read. Quote, P4, to ensure that all dwellings in Yeo Street receive a minimum 2 hours sunlight at the winter solstice. And 5.1.5.9, access, which is to be changed to read, which is to be changed to include P6, the number of retail and commercial customer spaces be limited to 180 spaces, and there be a, then I think you should put a semicolon, and then put P3 to be changed to read, despite P2, vehicular access may be provided from Yo Street subject to adequate demonstration that it will not present any adverse conflicts to the traffic flow on Yo Street. And then if you take those words and there be a single ingress and egress, if you could cut those out, and we'll change those to the end. This is just me assisting from the chair so that it reads clearly. So after Yo Street, put semicolon and add an additional performance measure. To be included as follows. Quote P7, a single, and then if you could paste those words, a single, the provision of a single, and there be the provision of a single ingress and egress on Yo Street in order to promote pedestrian safety. End quote.
And then number 3 is that we are.
So I'd probably put forming attachment 3 to this report in accordance with, I put those final words there, they still need to go, that council adopt the draft amendment to North Sydney DCP 2013.
With those, and then
add those words and then say as amended except for items blah, which, and then no we have to get this right. No brackets 5.5.2 for massing and scale be amended to read. And I think maybe we should do this as a separate thing in addition, the following amendments.
Yep, I'm happy with that.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, would you add living areas, please? Ensure that all living areas.
Yes, that's why we're working our way through it so that we're getting
Yeah.
exactly what it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
That council adopt the draft amendment as amended, and then I think you need those words forming attachment 3 to this report in accordance with clause blah.
Yes, so cut and paste.
So if you could cut that up to the top after 2013. As amended. And then I think we need a new 3.
Yeah.
In addition to the above, comma, the following amendments are to be made. Colon, and then do 5.1, so A 5.1.5.2, massing and scale be amended to read, and then if we could add in P4, if someone could go, might keep blanking.
Yep.
P4. So the words P4 to ensure that all dwellings in Yo Street receive a minimum 2 hours sunlight to living areas. 2 hours. So after the words sunlight to living areas at the winter solstice, and then for 5.1.5.9 access, that could be B.
Yep.
Take out and, so 5.5.1 access to be amended to include. P6, the number of retail and commercial spaces be limited to 180 spaces. Then P3 becomes C. P3 to be amended to read, despite P2. Vehicle access may be provided from Yeo Street, subject to adequate demonstration that it will not present any adverse conflicts to the traffic flow on Yeo Street. And then D, an additional performance measure to be included as follows, being performance measure to 5.1.59 access. Be included as follows, P7 and there, and you can take out the and there. So the provision of a single ingress and egress on Yeo Street in order to promote pedestrian safety. So take out their B, their B, the provision. Yep, that's fine. That's clear, I think, and that expresses what everybody's trying to achieve. Is the mover
I'm
happy with that? Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Seconded by councillor Keane.
I'll just briefly speak to it. The solar access is a huge concern. I think 2 hours is far too little in any case, but it is what it is. I actually think it's a human right to have solar access, and I can't believe that we're trading that off. I'd like to thank the speakers for coming up. I know how passionate all the residents are. It's been a long road, which we're kind of getting to the end of, but then the devil is in the detail. So thank you for all of your efforts and your tenacious reading and communications, and I hope that gives some comfort to what will be a very difficult few years ahead.
Are there any other speakers? I'll put the item, all those in favour, those against, and that is carried unanimously. That brings us to the next item brought forward, 10.9, the planning proposal 2 of 2023, 601 Pacific Highway, St Leonard's post-exhibition report. There is one registered speaker, Mr. Davey McDonald, if you would please come forward.
I have a question and I'll address it to you, Mayor, if I may, because I may have missed something. I wanted to actually talk to the, in this proposal about the rent to build. Is that a fait accompli that is now, because council discussed that previously, didn't it?
The recommendation in the report is to provide a non-residential FSR of 19:1, and that is something that I hope will be shortly adopted. And the purpose of that is to ensure that the IBM building remains a commercial building in that location in order to service the jobs targets that we have under the North District Plan.
Thank you. So to that end, I wanted to talk to that. And this is not just myself, I have discussed this with other people, that I would be keen to see all that development go for build for rent primarily, because there is already so much empty office space throughout North Sydney. We have a housing crisis, and I think there should be, the whole process of this should be revisited. And it's simply from that perspective. There is so much office space already available. And I think that all that you would be doing is taking employment from somewhere else and bringing it to an area of North Sydney. And we are short on housing to service North Sydney Hospital and a variety of other areas around town. So that is essentially it, and I just wanted to register that, and I have perceived that from people in the community. Housing crisis, plenty of office space, don't need any more created here, and in fact it would enhance small business in North Sydney with that development. And if you think that people are going to go from living in high up in that building to go down to work, they're not. You're going to encourage people to come in. We already have a situation where over 80% of the workforce in North Sydney comes from outside. Let's make it residential. That's what I would put to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McDonald. Are there any questions of the speaker? No. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Welsh, seconded by Councillor Berrigie. Do either of you wish to speak on it? I'm going to speak very briefly on it. And the reason I'm going to speak briefly on it is to address some of the things that Mr McDonald has said. Build to rent is an investment vehicle. It, in this country, doesn't promote affordable housing. And it's really paradoxical on the day that the state government announced the accelerated Todd precinct at Crow's Nest for an additional 5,900 dwellings on top of the 6,683 that are already planned under the 2036 plan, the majority of which, and they're all dwellings, they're housing. The state government targets for our municipality are overwhelmingly being accommodated in Crow's Nest. And in terms of addressing housing affordability, to almost no avail. There are, with the exception of a state significant development application currently for the overstation development that I applaud from the private sector provides 30% affordable housing for key workers at Royal North Shore Hospital. The announcement today sees between 3% and 18% for additional windfall yield of the already one of the most dense precincts in the state, in Crow's Nest, under the 2036 plan, to be provided to the private sector with no real requirement to even reach 30% affordable housing targets in that location. It is equally vital that whilst we're addressing, and we are more than addressing, the housing crisis in this precinct, that we don't give away employment land, and particularly on the doorstep of the hospital in what is a planned health precinct and education precinct. The IBM building, even under the Todd accelerated precinct, is acknowledged as being part of those jobs targets. That is the one strange thing in their announcement today, that they say they are still trying to protect. So for all those reasons, I will say on this particular planning proposal, this is one where we've had two hands tied behind our backs on this. We've got less and less leverage in order to persuade applicants to provide voluntary planning agreements. This is this third time that this has been before us, and that's because we kept sending it back to seek some form of voluntary planning agreement. And as small as it is at 170 odd thousand, it is for a commercial building going to contribute to the public domain to service those workers and some of the residents existing and planned in that precinct. So I would urge you to support the motion. Are there any other speakers? I'll put the item, all those in favour and those against, and that is carried. That brings us to 10.10. Councillor Keane sought to brought this forward. Is there a mover of the recommendation? I'll move. Moved by Councillor Berrigie, seconded by Councillor Welsh. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you. I just want to seek some clarification on the recommendation. Item 4 is that council endorse the removal of Woodley shed on the condition that Transport for New South Wales meets its commitment made to the community in relation to the delivery of the adaptive reuse of Woodley shed. So it's removal of the shed. Yep. And then adaptive.
I can give some of the background to that. 2 years ago, the announcement from the state government was that they were going to demolish Woodley shed. It's open to the Western Harbour Tunnel under their consent to do so. We lobbied very hard, and this has been one of a great battle for this peninsula for decades. And what has happened is that as part of the park that is proposed and the design work is ongoing, Transport for New South Wales have come to they provided a number of options to the Waverton Peninsula Working Group and the number of precincts, all of whom have endorsed the ultimate offer from Transport for New South Wales, which is it's unstable. We will demolish it, but we will rebuild it with a heritage interpretation. And that is, in the world of Transport for New South Wales, a win for our community.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Madam Mayor. I guess it's the language around adaptive reuse as opposed to a new and existing facility. And then my next point is that item 7, that council know that the funding for the fit out and ongoing costs associated with the new community facility will be required by way of special rate variation. My understanding that this was budgeted by Transport for New South Wales to actually provide that.
No, it's not. That they will replace it, but they won't do the fit out.
Do the fit out.
It's the usual way with Transport for New South Wales. If there are any discussion, I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. That brings us to 10.11, tender 8 of 2024, open space mowing services. There is one registered speaker, David McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason I came up to speak on this one is specifically under regarding section 10A, paragraph 4 of that act. The General Manager will be aware of this. I have concerns, and this will apply to a couple of other issues that will be coming up this evening, is there is a propensity for us to go into closed session. In other words, members of the public can't know necessarily what is going on immediately. And I just want to address it in this way, in terms of probity. I say, there is no conflict or risk of unfair disclosure once lodgement period for tenders has closed. Probity enacted and post-probity, council can publish and redact the tender material, i.e. business names, if they so wished, if they felt that way. However, for long-term infrastructure or service procurement, there is no impact in any of the things that will come before you this evening. Council business is good business with guarantee of payment. What is needed, for example, in the case of the North Sydney Olympic Pool, is regarding gym equipment, and I'll come to that because that's the next item. So what I'm saying is, and I'm sorry I'm not very articulate this evening, what I'm saying is that once probity is entered, thereafter, stakeholders, of which we are, and this is referred to in the Legal Act, Section 2 of the Act, Section 11 of the Public Local Government Act, Section 11, is that we can have access to see things if it isn't going to impact the confidentiality. And I'm saying that in many of the items that will come before you this evening, there is no conflict in terms of infrastructure and length. And so that's what I wanted to raise here in regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Is there a mover, Councillor Berrigan?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Welsh, any discussion? I'll put the item. All those in favour? Those against? And that is carried. That brings us to item 10.12, supply, delivery, installation, commissioning and maintenance of gym equipment, North Sydney Olympic Pool. There is one registered speaker, David McDonald, if you would please come forward.
I have a question in regards to this tender specifically of why and we talk about it here, it's supply, delivery, installation, commissioning and maintenance of gym equipment. Now, my background has been in the fitness industry for a long, long time, and you may want to ask me some questions about that. The question I have specifically to this gym equipment is why now, and what's the business case? What's the purpose? What's the outcome we're looking for? I say we should put this aside until the pool is complete. I also go on and say in the meantime, the space could be utilised for other health and fitness users. Pilates, stretching, a whole range of things. It doesn't have to be equipped yet. We should look at leasing that space. If we go with this route that appears to be what is being suggested here, that we purchase, and someone will advise me if it's intended to be leased, there is new technologies, and therefore, with all equipment today, it's much better proposition to lease it where it will receive ongoing service and updating. I believe there are enough gyms in North Sydney, and well, who's to say what the culture is that we want to present here? Is it going to be a bodybuilding gym or whatever? I don't know anything about what is proposed there. And the other thing, and this is where I come back again to the area of confidentiality, I think as stakeholders, we're entitled to know precisely what type of equipment, what is the plan, and whilst Duncan, I think it's Duncan Rennie, has come with some experience, there are other people within this community who will have also a lot of experience in dealing with gyms and putting them up. I mean, I had a gym that was opened by Henry Cooper, British heavyweight boxing champion, and I'm sort of thinking of that. I've got boys who've gone on to be coaches, FIFA coaches, grade 2 coaches in FIFA. I've had boys play at Arsenal, Millwall, so on and so forth. I'm a qualified fitness instructor. I did my international masters in fitness and conditioning. I've run several gyms here. So I have concerns. I think if the idea is to purchase, we should be considering leasing, because it's much better as a proposition than it sits somewhere else on the asset sheet. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that we defer this item to a councillor briefing. I've read the tender report.
Just quickly, is there a seconder for the motion?
Yeah.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I've read the tender report and have some queries over it, but I'd also like to look at it in terms of finances and a sensitivity analysis alongside the long-term financial plan, and just better understand what it is that we're leasing, the terms, and everything else to do with the tenders. So if we can move to a councillor briefing, that would be appreciated.
Is there any further discussion? I'll put the deferral to a briefing. All those in favour? Those against? And that is carried unanimously. Item 10.13, North Sydney Oval Cricket Australia multi-year venue hire agreement 24-25 to 28-29. Mr. McDonald, you are a registered speaker if you would care to come forward.
Mayor, if I could just address here, because I don't want to, no? Okay, I'll come round there. Okay. The issue again is one of this closed tender business. I've already told you why I think that's not relevant to any of these situations at all. And I think we need to know and have better access. We're told that we're in a time of greater transparency, and I think we as the public should be able to review and see exactly what's being planned in that sense. And there's another one coming up, so I will repeat for that one as well, which you have me down as a speaker. Many people have great concerns about lack of transparency in this and the expertise behind it, lack thereof. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any? There's a motion, councillor Berrigan.
Recommendation.
Seconded by councillor Walsh. Any discussion? I put the item on. Councillor Keane.
I'd just like to acknowledge North Sydney Oval as a elite sporting facility, and I'm pleased to support this recommendation.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Put the item. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That brings us to item 10.14, North Sydney Olympic Pool redevelopment update. Mr. McDonald, you have registered to speak to this item. If you would come forward, please.
Yeah. I'm still getting up. Specifically to this one, I know that there is a plan about a gelato bar and kiosk that's included in this proposal. And my question is, and I'm sorry some of you councillors look irritated, I'm here because I'm a concerned resident, okay, thank you. And I wonder, when anybody takes on a space for a cafe, gelato bar, or whatever it is, the landlord, the lessor, leases it and it's leased as an empty shell. And I wonder why, if that isn't the case in this case, why is it that we look as if we are going to be paying for the fit out? The fit out's normally taken on by the person that's taking on and putting in a business there. Okay, that's why I just wanted to raise that with you. This is very unusual, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McDonald. Is there a motion?
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved
Mayor.
by councillor Berrigan, seconded by councillor Walsh. Is there any discussion? I'll put the item. All those in favour? Or we can recommit because we're midway through the vote. So if you, if we're midway through the vote, so if you could move all those in favour. And that is carried. That brings us to the notices of motion. The first is 11.1, councillor Hoy.
Thank you. I brought this motion forward today to express concern about what I considered. Do I have to move it first?
Yes, you do.
I would like to move the motion.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by councillor Keane.
This motion is expressing concern about what I consider to be a dangerous decision by the privatised electricity distributor Ausgrid to cut critical staffing levels in our area. We've already seen evidence in other parts of the state of the damaging effects of cost cutting by privatised power network operators. Most dramatically, we've seen this in Broken Hill, where the wholly privatised transmission operator Transgrid been accused of cost cutting and a failure to maintain transmission infrastructure, resulting in a catastrophic power outage that left the Broken Hill community without reliable power for weeks. This is the danger of a privately owned energy network. Network operators become conflicted and all too often will seek to cut costs and engage in behaviour that's not in the public interest in the pursuit of shareholder returns. Since its privatisation in October 2016, wages for power workers at Ausgrid have declined by approximately 9.4% in real terms, while the cost of living has grown over 50% more than wages. Entry-level line workers now earn around 35% less than the same worker at Energy Queensland, while the total compensation package for Ausgrid's 9 executive leadership team members and 9 board of directors was over $12.5 million in the 2023 financial year. Ausgrid's network is divided into districts with specially trained employees known as district operators, acting as first responders to all hazards, including blackouts and natural disasters. Each district has a critical coverage level, which is deemed as the minimum staffing level typically needed to respond to urgent unplanned work, as well as a base coverage level reflecting the minimum staffing level required to maintain emergency response times and complete planned work. Ausgrid is planning to reduce base and critical coverage levels in the Sydney North region, which covers our community. Under these changes, as few as 2 district operators could be responsible for coordinating incident responses in responses to blackouts, natural disasters, or accidents involving electrical infrastructure. I've seen Ausgrid's own internal risk assessment of these staffing changes, and the report states that even when all state control measures are put in place, the risk that members of the public being exposed to electrical or fire hazards remains high. Other dangers include increased duration of power outage for life support customers leading to medical issues and increased duration of power outage for other essential services. There is also the risk of delays in the delivery of planned work and increased psychosocial risk to workers, including PTSD due to exposure and the effects of responding to critical incidents. Despite these risks, Ausgrid has decided to proceed with the changes, relying on the sole justification of a pursuit of efficiency and productivity, not improving safety or climate resilience. The Ausgrid workers are strongly opposed to the proposed changes. These workers live in the communities in which they work, they raise families here, send kids to our schools, play in our local sports teams, and spend money at our local small businesses. These workers are integrated into our community and would never take action that actively puts their neighbours and communities at risk of harm. but the private owners of our energy networks are potentially putting our local communities at risk through their approach to management of the grid, including by contributing to a worker and apprentice shortage through unsustainably low and uncompetitive wages, by reductions in critical staffing levels in pursuit of a boost to their profit margins. I'm of the opinion that Ausgrid's proposed changes to staffing levels in the Sydney North region are not in the public interest and have the potential of putting at risk the safety and wellbeing of our community. I think this warrants a response from the council requesting Ausgrid do not proceed with this decision, and that council should seek further information regarding the justification and implications, both for workers and our community, of this decision. I'd like to thank the Electrical Trades Union for their advocacy on behalf of our community as well as their members on this matter, and I encourage you all to support the motion.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No, I'm going to put, okay,
This one, got it. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hoy. I just have a question. Are you proposing that once the report is prepared and it comes back to council, we will then be sending the report to Ausgrid for their response and a reaction to the concerns of the risks that are raised in this report?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
no further questions or discussion. I'll put the item. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. If I could have a procedural motion, because it seems like the entire agenda was brought forward, but it wasn't. There's item 10.1 matters outstanding and item 10.5 investment loan and borrowings. Is there on Globo?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move those on Globo, but there's also the notice of motion 1142 as well.
I understand that, but I'm just.
Yep,
just
sure. So if
tidying
we
up
could
the
move those
agenda.
two motions on Globo.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Holding. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. That brings us to the final item on the agenda. The notice of motion from councillors Berricky and Santa. Councillor Berricky.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion and I've just
seconded by councillor Santa.
And councillor Santa, if you'd be happy to accommodate these. I've had quite a few comments on the motion, all positive. But if we could add a number 4, please. That following these meetings, council engages with Events New South Wales, the Office of the 24-Hour Economy, local community sporting and running groups, local schools and local businesses,
running groups.
Running group.
Yeah. Thanks.
Should I get this? Sorry.
Community running.
Local community and running group, local community running groups, yep. Local schools and businesses to explore all opportunities for the marathon in North Sydney.
Can you take that on as the seconder?
Yes, that's fine.
Don't be sending one out. Okay. This is really exciting. To think that we have Abbott World Marathon, the 7th one, and it is starting at our very own Blue Line. It's going to be an amazing thing for North Sydney, and to have so many people coming to North Sydney. It's not just the runners, it's their supporters, it's families, people make a trip of it, and North Sydney is the place that they start. So I think time is of the essence to a degree. A lot of this isn't about money, this is about collaboration with all other tourism and sporting groups to really make this a fantastic experience for not just the runners, but for the community, and for our businesses, for our residents, and also the supporters. So I commend the motion.
Councillor King.
Just a question. Events New South Wales was rolled into Destination New South Wales quite a few years ago. So you've already got Destination New South Wales there. You don't need to add Events New South Wales.
Thanks for that. That's great.
No, that's okay. And I also want to make mention that Park Run runs in North Sydney Oval. And I know you've mentioned
that's covered by.
I know you've mentioned it in local running groups, but it is good to know that just to mention Park Run here and the fact that they do run throughout North Sydney Oval.
Good.
No, I won't mention Park Run, but there's many running groups,
Yeah.
there's Kirribilli
Okay, hold on.
runners, there's, so I won't.
Councillor Berkey, thank you, and Councillor Keane. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Berkey, would you like your right of reply?
No, that's fine, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to put the item, all those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. And that brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you all for your participation. And for those in the gallery and observing by webcast. Thank you.